this meeting to order at 4:01. This is a meeting of the Grand Rapids Civilian Appeals Board. The purpose of this meeting and our board is to act as a reviewing body pursuant to City Commission Policy 800-02 for findings of fact made by Internal Affairs with respect to complaints brought by individuals who believe they have been mistreated by officers of the Grand Rapids Police Department. At this point, I'd like to ask roll to be called.
Russell Olmsted.
Here.
Sophia Brewer.
Here.
Reginald Howard.
Here.
Michelle Williams.
Present.
Jason Osborne.
Present.
Dean Pacific. And Jordan Cross. Absent.
Thank you. That brings us to approval of minutes. We actually have two separate minutes to approve because we didn't have quorum at our last meeting in June. So we'll start with approval of minutes from March 20th. Does anybody have any questions or anything that needs to be changed in the minutes or altered in the minutes? All right, seeing none, do we have a motion to approve the minutes?
So move.
Go ahead.
So Sophia.
Seconded by Reggie.
All right, I'll call for a voice vote. Those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? It carries. That moves on to the meeting minutes for June 20th. Anything that anyone needs to change from those minutes?
I do.
Okay.
Not be pedantic. The spelling of my last name, Osbourn.
Anything else? All right. With that change, do we have a motion to approve the minutes?
So moved.
A second?
Seconded.
All right, I'll call a voice vote. Those in favor? Aye. Those opposed? It carries. That brings us to the board liaison report.
Thank you. At this time, the only matter that I have to report on is the actual Grand Rapids Civilian Appeal Board biennial report, which we have all been working on very meticulously. And I want to acknowledge Sophia, Michelle, Russell for their steadfast efforts, as well as Matthew Smith, who is no longer with us. These four individuals really poured their heart and soul into this report. And I believe when the public gets an opportunity to sit down and read it, it will shine through. So I just want to briefly run through what the report contents have. I'm not going to go into great detail, but page 1, it begins with a letter from the chair. That's a letter from Russell, Mr. Olmsted. On page 4, we have an in memoriam of Matthew Smith. Page 5 is looking forward, board insights and reflections. We have some brief history about the Civilian Appeal Board, the purpose, the board structure, and the mission on page 6. We have a list of the board members as of December 31st, 2023. On page 7 of the report, we talk about the complaint process, appeal eligibility, and aftermath of a decision by the board, and that all that continues on page 7 to 8. Pages 9, 10. All the way, 9 through 13, all deal with complaint information and complaint statistics. On page 14, we have a summary of the appeals that took place during 2022 and 2023. We also have some hyperlinks for the digital version of this report where you can click on and actually drop into the actual hearing itself. On page 16, there's a brief summary of the meetings that took place over the previous 2 calendar years. And then continuing at the bottom of page 16, in sight of the changes to the collective bargaining agreements between the 2 police labor unions in the city, there were some changes to the Civilian Appeal Board process, and really some of those were just inner workings, what departments held on to certain information, where that information is going to come from, the ability of the board to review the information and the means behind that. So that information is going to be contained in that final section there, and that runs all the way from page 16 to page 18. And you got your glossary of terms and abbreviations and your appendix at the tail end. Our plan is for this report to be made available to the general public on the Civilian Appeal Board website by not later than close of business tomorrow. And the only reason it is that I have to push it through, set up a hyperlink for it, and it has to be approved by our communications department, and then it'll be made available. And that is all.
Thank you very much. Are there any questions from the board members? I would like to also express my thanks, and I think I would speak for those of us on the subcommittee as well, that all of the help that OPA had in the process in helping form this, not just our parts, but the parts that the subcommittee was not a part of. Truly appreciate that. I do believe it's a very comprehensive review and report, and I think it has a lot of information that is good for the public to hear, good for the commissioners to hear, good for the city to hear in the, to try to be transparent about the information and to try to understand the process. I think it's a great report that we've all put together, and I appreciate your help from the OPA, so thank you. So do we have to, for point of order, do we have to approve this now as a board? Is that correct? Yeah. So are there any other changes or anything else that needs to be updated on it? Have we all read it too many times? All right, seeing none, is there a motion to approve this report?
So moved.
A second?
Second.
All right, if I think a roll call vote for this, if that's okay.
Russell Olmsted,
Yes.
Sophia Brewer,
Yes.
Reginald Howard,
Yes.
Michelle Williams,
Yes.
Jason Osborne.
Aye.
It carries. Thank you very much. That brings us, although, is there anything else from the board liaison reports or anything?
Yes, so there was some discussion about holding officer elections. We reached out to the city clerk's office, but unfortunately they couldn't have a member here today. And it was a little bit of short notice on our end as well. We will plan to get some background information from them and have that in preparation for next month's meeting,
Okay.
where we should be able to hold the officer elections. We would like to have actual representation. I believe last time this occurred was May of 2022. So we're looking to sort of follow the same process. Representation from city clerk. They can be here to answer any sort of questions the board may have. I know we have a few new members who won't be familiar with the process. So it'll just be good information not only for the board, but for the general public, again, to hear and have on record. So that is the plan for next month's meeting.
Okay. Any questions about that? All righty. I do have one thing. As far as the new members and to the board, I just want to make sure that we're reviewing and staying on top of attendance for the board members who have been absent.
Yes, so we actually did a holistic review of attendance records for the past, I want to say 2 years, so all the way back from January 2023 to the current date. I'm happy to report nobody violated the attendance policy.
Good.
We're good to go there, and we are tracking it in a more structured manner.
All right.
Going forward.
Excellent. Thank you very much. If there's nothing else, that brings us to any old business that we need to discuss. I guess from my end, I know that I had asked at a past meeting about possibility of doing some review of bylaw and bylaw changes. I know I emailed that out in March. It's been a while since we've had a meeting together, so I emailed that out to everybody in March as far as ideas around that. I was wondering if board members would be on board with forming a subcommittee to look into bylaw changes, not just those, but any bylaw changes that the board may be looking to do. It's not something we need to approve at this meeting, something we can discuss, but I wanted to bring it up to possibly review for the next meeting. I think it would be a good idea. The bylaws have not been updated in a long time. The board is operating completely differently than when I started on this board even 6 years ago. And I think it would be a good idea to even have a subcommittee read through those bylaws, see what we can update. Some of the things that have been brought up in the past about even altering when people's start date and end dates are for their terms, so that not all of the board is up all at one time and having to potentially replace that amount of institutional knowledge on a board that is a little bit more difficult than some of the other boards as far as the necessity of knowledge to serve on properly. So things like that I think could review to allow ourselves to function a little bit better in the future. So I can resubmit those out to you. I also brought hard copies that I can give you as well of just the ones that I was thinking about, but that doesn't mean that it should be limited to just that by any means. I think it's an open review that we should think about from a subcommittee standpoint.
And what would be OPA's or the city involvement with that bylaws review?
I can talk a little bit about, in the past, there have been conversations about different implications that maybe changing certain bylaws might have in terms of the collective bargaining aspects. Those are certainly things we would want you to know. If there are things that maybe we can't necessarily change because it would conflict with the contract that we have with the labor union, those would be open conversations. Process-wise, we could give you legal advice about how to have a vote on the bylaws. Some things might be obsolete. It just kind of depends on what the committee would want to focus on. If there were best practices, I'm sure OPA and the attorney's office could help with that sort of research too. We've formed a nonprofit related to the cannabis industry and the Seeding Justice, a nonprofit from the city. So we've written bylaws for nonprofits recently that maybe is outside of the scope of CAB, but given the policy, the labor contracts, and the bylaws, we would want to make sure that you understood all of the implications that might happen if you decided to pull one of those levers that was related to the other two.
And what would be the number of committee members we would be able to have, given that our current number is 7? Is it 3?
Yep.
Okay.
And so, so that process doesn't have, so would a member of OPA or the city attorney's office be a part of that committee or sit on that committee on a regular basis so that we don't have to rework and, decide on a change and then come back and get approval? We can have those conversations in real time.
Yep. So I'm happy to assist. I'm pretty sure Brandon would be happy to assist as well. I know Phil will throw his hat in the ring to review the changes after you all have come to the final conclusion of what you would like to see done. The way the policy is written, well, the bylaws, I should say, not the policy. Section 7.2 deals with amending the bylaws. And in essence, once you all come up with, as a subcommittee, a final set of changes you'd like to see done, you can turn them into us. We'll take a look over them, let you know, as Phil said, whatever, if you pull this lever here, what's going to happen over there. We'll advise you on that. But that doesn't actually become official until you file a notice of intent to amend. And you'd have to do that at the meeting prior to the open discussion for the amendment. So our hope and would be that you all would come to us before we even get to that point, so that, you have the best chance of putting something forward that is reflective of your desires, your wishes, and your collective thought.
Yeah, and I think as much as you want us to be there in advance, we're happy to be there to make sure that you're making efficient use of your volunteer time. Also don't want to stifle any conversation. I know that there's some creative thought that might benefit from not having city attorney or OPA representative in the room, and I want to respect that autonomy as well.
Can we go ahead and form a subcommittee?
Sure. We
might
don't,
as well
if
get the
people are
work going.
comfortable with it, we can do it at this meeting. It's not a problem at all. I'm comfortable with it.
What are we
so.
thinking in terms of time commitment and things like that?
I think that would be up to us, honestly, or up to the subcommittee and up to us as a board to try to put together. If we want to put constraints on that as we're forming the committee, that could be one way to go about it as far as what time we want to put into it and expect from board members to put into it on a volunteer basis. I don't see why that would be an issue.
So I just think that we have two newer members of our board that are not here. And I would certainly like to get more voices in some of the policies and information that we submit to the public. Like, so this report was the three of us. So our three voices are all through this report, along with, even though we had consensus. I would love to have other voices be a part of some of the discussions and conversations that we have from this board. So hopefully, as we move on this bylaws committee, that we can include some of those voices. So for that reason, I am going to graciously bow out, but if we don't get enough volunteers, I'm glad to step in.
Anyone else have any points of discussion that they would like before we start talking about who would like to serve on the subcommittee? Or, I think to your point, though, Michelle, I think we should discuss before we actually decide on who is going to be on it, what time commitment do we think would be necessary on this? As far as how much time it would take to go through it, that's a good question. I think a review of the bylaws themselves would start with that, and then see what we would think what would need to be updated out of that. I think a good timetable might be 3 months, I would guess, for discussing it and giving enough time to go through. And if board members on the subcommittee could commit to meeting, I would think once a month should be suffice for us to be able to come to some sort of idea of if we're in the right ballpark or if we need to extend time before we have something that's presentable back to the rest of the board.
Phil, is it permissible for the subcommittee to individually survey other members of the group to get their feedback for them to kind of process?
We want to avoid what's called constructive quorum, or it's kind of a way around the Open Meetings Act. So there might be a way for like the liaison being OPA to run a survey that might be kind of anonymized to say, here are some of my thoughts around it. But if you're deliberating on an issue or deciding an issue, those are the two defined legal terms of art that that are required to be done in the Open Meetings Act. We also, I guess it might not make sense for this situation, but you can meet for training purposes outside of the Open Meetings Act in a amount that's quorum, but you can't deliberate or decide on issues. So I think there is a little bit of some room to survey and get some thoughts around priorities from the board, but probably not going out and having like 2-on-1 or meetings. So.
I was referring to something where we would send it, get information back, and then be able to synthesize it. And if, anonymizing it allows us to do that, I think it would be good to have all of the input as the committee's getting started. So.
Yeah, that would be something.
Create more work.
Thanks.
Yeah, that's something we'd be happy to get done for you all. So I'll reach out, talk with Brandon once he's back next week, and we'll get something planned out and send out a mass communication to the board. Just kind of figure out the ins and outs of how that'll work, what questions we want to probe into. So I look forward to putting it together.
Maybe the first meeting of the subcommittee could kind of help figure that out, if that was possible. I don't know.
Hey, will it be possible to get a copy of the bylaws before we even form a subcommittee? I would like to review them to even see how much time it would take before I obligate or say I can't do it. So I would like to read them first.
Yeah, so the bylaws are available online on the Grand Rapids Civilian Appeal Board website. But if you want to just stop down anytime, Reginald, we can get you a copy of them. We can, I'll send out an email today with them attached. Okay.
Thank you very much. I think that's a really good point about giving time for people to review, to see what the time commitment would be. I think that is a fair point. This is obviously something that I've been thinking about, so I would be more ready than what others would be on this. So I think it would be a good idea to bring this back for the agenda in the next meeting, so that we can discuss it from that standpoint, informing the board. And that might get us some time for OPA as well. If you could think about like a survey, to be able to, some sort of survey that could be sent out to the board as was discussed. I think that would be a great idea to get some input and kind of idea around what areas of concerns may be there from current board members. So, any other points? All right. That closes the old business. It brings us to open discussion. Any open discussion that board members would like to have?
I was just wanted to check and see, it's been a while since we've had
Yes, I was going to bring up the same.
a case, or is there no activity? Can you kind of update us on what's going on? Because I'm a little concerned that, one, that people are not aware of our services, or are not, or don't feel comfortable taking advantage of our services. And I want to just see if there are any things, if we need to have some discussion about how to get more information out there about why we are here.
So how that process works is when a complaint comes through, if it falls within the parameters of City Commission Policy 800-02, which form and give this board power, then it's laid out on the complaint disposition report, which I'm sure all of you have probably seen at the very bottom. It'll say, this matter is appealable to blah, 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 and then it'll say what you can do. To date, for this calendar year, I have not had any complainants reach out to me about filing an appeal. I'm not sure the law department has or not, but we haven't had any NOPA. And I can't really speak to why. I don't really know why. I'm not really comfortable hypothecating about something that, we haven't researched. But to date, we don't have one.
We do get notice when a CAB eligible notice goes out to an individual. So we are tracking whether or not the department is sending out eligibility, and then there's a certain amount of time, I can't remember if it's 14 days, that they have to initiate that appeal. And so we internally will close that file once that 14 days runs. I know that we're getting notice that CAB eligible cases are going out. We're seeing the notices going out. I can't speak on the frequency. It would be more of a guess, or kind of a gut feeling of what I'm tracking in our internal legal file system. We could report back out that statistic if that would be helpful. Annually, it's not uncommon for cases to come in at the rate of about 1 or 2 a year. That's over like a 20. Since 1996, I think we have the data. We've looked at it in the past. We've had some out years where we had some of the civil unrest that happened downtown, in a lot of cases that individuals did choose to bring to CAB in appeal of the the case, and we had some backlog that also happened due to board vacancies, COVID, and some internal changes that caused us to feel like we had a lot more cases at a particular given time, just because we had not heard the cases as quickly as maybe we would have wanted to. So that's some anecdotal information based on some of the other historical look back that we've done in the past. But so I wouldn't be overly concerned, but you are asking good questions, and I think it warrants an annual check-in at least to see.
Is the 14 days that are specified for the period that they can appeal, is that set in the contracts, or where does that 14-day requirement come from?
It may be reduced to writing in several places. I'd double check 800-02 might provide that 14-day window. It may also be the contracts, because there is potential employment findings that are made. The employee does have an expectation to some resolution, as well as the complainant. So I can find that answer out. I would not be shocked if it appears in several different documents.
Has the OPA ever, Phil, if you know as well, before the OPA, has there ever been an effort to survey those people who have not decided to use the appeal, to see whether or not it was because of the completion of the investigation process and they are happy with the result, or if it was some other reason?
Again, my information would be more anecdotally for the 5 years and any research I've been able to come up with internally. I think there were some changes about 5 years ago where multiple departments within the city were able to receive those appeals as opposed to just being received by internal affairs. I don't know if that was direct customer feedback that caused that change to take place, but I think at about the same time that OPA was being developed in the city, we looked at some best practices. We, meaning the city of Grand Rapids, looked at some best practices on how to have better client services with individuals that were complaining about police conduct, and some of the changes that were influenced or implemented by OPA were related in part to best practices that were, I think it was National Board of Oversight Specialists, if that.
National Association of Civilian Oversight,
Yeah.
Law Enforcement.
And there may have also been some influence from individuals that were commenting on their experience, but I don't know that that's been done in a very formal way.
And I will say too, just on OPA's end, where the complaint originates matters. Okay, so if we have complainants that are going directly to internal affairs, much like the last two appeals that this board heard, there's very little opportunity for OPA to follow up because our office is still subject to, redactions consistent with state law and, informational privacy, that sort of thing. So we don't necessarily always have the opportunity to follow up with complainants. However, if they come through our office, we will follow up with them. We do our best to remain neutral and objective, though. We don't force it one way or the other.
Right.
The way I always like to say is we just tell you which way the wind is blowing, but you steer the ship. And, that's the approach that I take. That's the approach that Brandon takes. We want the complainant to drive and steer the ship, but we'll just tell them and lay out what their options are.
Right.
So if I understand correctly, OPA is receiving contact information, at least for some of these complaints that come through. Is that accurate?
Yeah, so if a complainant comes directly to our office, we would have their contact information.
Okay.
If they're going through internal affairs, then their information is subject to redaction consistent with collective bargaining and other state laws.
Okay. So here's the concern I have, is that, over the past year or so, we've had a couple appeals we've had. There have been some troubling statements made to me that suggest there may be some kind of chilling effect that is being put on these complainants. And I fear, we don't have evidence for this thing, but I fear that we may be receiving a dearth of complaints, and even to where it's consistent this year with past years, that this is a problem that's been persistent, for several years. And so I guess, I don't think there's anything this board can do, but I would put it to you, if there's something that you can do to survey people that have filed complaints and have not followed up on them, to do nothing else but to understand what the reason was for not following up. Whether it's that they were, like I said, they were satisfied, they think it was a fair outcome, or if they didn't, or they just didn't want to waste more time on it, or if they felt like they were going to get persecuted by taking it further. I think that is neutral. I think it's objective information. I think it'd be very helpful to understand where we are, even if the ultimate conclusion is that, we just have a satisfied populace, then that doesn't need to use this route available to them. So, I don't think it's anything for this board necessarily, but I would put it to you I think it might be worth investigating.
Definitely hear you. Mr. Howard, I see you're ready to say something too. I would encourage you to look back at some of the statistics as well from Internal Affairs, because that provides some additional context. I'm not suggesting that there's no credibility to what you've just kind of proposed. What we do know is a lot of the Internal Affairs complaints about police conduct come from other officers as well. And so those cases that are closed out with some sort of resolution are not necessarily eligible for the Civilian Appeals Board. So when you look at the volume of the cases that go into Internal Affairs, you look at how many are CAB eligible, we might be able to glean some better statistical data on how many are citizen-filed complaints versus other complainants coming into the system that might be helpful.
I appreciate that. I appreciate the question, Sophia, very much. It's definitely been a concern of mine as well as all of us, and we've expressed it in the past. And I think anything we can do as a board and as a body to try to evaluate the process in ways that we can improve this for the community. And that includes getting community members to attend the meetings so that they can see this process, because I do believe that this process is extremely important to transparency and accountability for and trust in our representation of government, as well as in trust in our policing. So I appreciate that. Anything else for for open discussion? Actually, I did have one other thing. I'm sorry, as I'm closing up my documents here, it goes back to something that Reginald just said. One of the things that was one of the only things organizationally that was wonderful before OPA came to this was new members did get a packet that had all of this information in it with the bylaws and the 800-02 and a description of Robert's Rule of Order, all of these sorts of things. And I think it would be beneficial if it hasn't been being done. I think it would be beneficial to new members when they come on board to have that sort of packet for being able to review these things. So, all right. If there's nothing else, then that moves us to public comment. As there is no one here for public comment, that closes public comment, and we stand adjourned at 4:34. Thank you.